The key turned in the lock with a grating sound that echoed the scraping in my soul. I didn't move from the desk. I just sat there in the silence, listening to the floorboards creak under their self-righteous weight. First came my father-in-law, Robert, his heavy, confident steps announcing his presence as the man of the house, or so he thought. Then came his wife, my mother-in-law, Susan, her sharp, clicking heels trailing him like a vulture circling its prey. Finally, my brother-in-law, Kevin, and his pregnant wife, Karen, shuffled in, their whispers filled with a greedy excitement that made my stomach turn. They were here to perform an exorcism of sorts, to purge the memory of my daughter, Lily, from this house, from this room, to make way for their own precious bloodline. They stopped dead in the doorway of Lily's bedroom. I watched their faces in the reflection of my dark computer monitor. Confusion, then irritation, and finally a simmering rage. The room wasn't a shrine of grief. The pink wallpaper was gone, replaced by a calm, professional gray. Lily's bed was gone, her toys were gone, her clothes were gone. In their place stood sleek, modern office furniture. And I was sitting behind the large oak desk, my hands folded calmly on its surface, looking directly at them. Susan's perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Robert's face, usually a mask of smug authority, slackened into a pale, fleshy mess. They saw me, but they didn't see the broken, weeping widow they had been tormenting for the past 6 months. They saw someone else entirely. They thought my grief had destroyed me, but it had actually forged me into the one thing they never expected, the owner of their entire world. You're probably wondering why my husband's parents were trying to turn my dead daughter's bedroom into a nursery for their other son. The answer begins with my late husband, Mark, and the lie his entire family built around him. A lie I unknowingly paid for with my youth, my money, and ultimately, my child. Susan was the first to find her voice, a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the heavy silence. What is this? What have you done to Lily's room? She stammered, her gaze darting around as if the sight of a clean, functional office was a personal insult. Robert just stared, his jaw working silently. He looked at me like I was a stranger, a ghost who had wandered into the wrong house. In a way, I was. The woman they knew, the quiet, compliant cash machine they had cultivated for 15 years, was gone forever. To understand the disbelief on their faces, you have to see me as they always saw me, a stepping stone for their precious son, Mark. I met Mark in college. I was laser-focused, working 2 jobs to pay my tuition for a business degree, determined to build a life my hard-working parents could only dream of. Mark was in the same program, but he floated through it with an easy charm that I mistook for confidence. He was handsome, funny, and came from a family that, on the surface, seemed perfect. His father, Robert, was a self-proclaimed investor, and his mother, Susan, was a pillar of her local charity circles. They lived in a nice house in a gated community and drove luxury cars. They projected an image of effortless wealth and class. I fell for the whole package. From the beginning, they made their disapproval of me clear, but in subtle, cutting ways. They'd call me Mark's hard-working little friend and ask intrusive questions about my parents' blue-collar jobs with feigned curiosity. They never missed a chance to talk about their other son, Kevin, who was supposedly a genius and didn't need to sully his hands with part-time jobs. Kevin was the heir apparent. Mark was the handsome one they needed to steer toward success, and I, it turned out, was the perfect vehicle. When Mark's student loan was delayed, I picked up extra shifts to cover his tuition, telling myself it was an investment in our future. When his car broke down, I drained my savings to fix it so he wouldn't be inconvenienced. The real trap was set right after graduation. I landed a fantastic job with a signing bonus, and I wanted to use it for a down payment on a small house. That's when Mark came to me with a worried look on his face. "My dad ran my finances," he said. And he thinks, well, because of your family's credit history, it would be better if everything was in my name. Just for now. To protect our assets, he said it with such sincerity, such concern for our future. I was 22, in love, and I trusted him completely. I handed over my entire signing bonus, and we bought our first house. A house that legally and secretly was only his. It was the first brick in the prison they were building around me. That one decision snowballed. A few years later, I had an idea for a logistics company. I saw a gap in the market, drew up a business plan, and secured a small business loan, co-signed by my father using his own house as collateral. Mark was excited, but Robert and Susan were quick to offer their guidance. They sat us down in their pristine living room, smelling of lemon polish and condescension. "This is a wonderful venture," Robert said, steepling his fingers. "But a husband and wife being co-owners can get messy. For tax purposes and legal simplicity, it's far cleaner to have one name on the incorporation documents. It presents a stronger, more unified front." Mark, already conditioned to see his father as a financial guru, nodded along eagerly. "He's right," Mark told me later. "It's just a piece of paper. We know it's our company. So I did it. I built my company from the ground up, working 18-hour days while Mark held a vague consultant title. I was the one negotiating contracts, managing drivers, and balancing the books until 2 in the morning. He was the one taking his parents and his brother Kevin out to fancy dinners on the company card, telling them all about his latest business success. I was too exhausted to fight, and I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, as long as our family was secure. Then, Lily was born, and for a while, none of it mattered. The moment I held her, this perfect, tiny human, a piece of my heart I never knew was missing, clicked into place. She was my everything, my reason. The long hours, the silent sacrifices, they all felt worth it because of her. She had my eyes and Mark's smile, and I loved her with a ferocity that eclipsed everything else. My in-laws were thrilled, of course. They finally had their grandchild, their legacy. They'd visit and hold her, cooing about how she had the good family genes and how she would be a perfect playmate for Kevin's future children someday. The comparison started early. The year Lily turned 2, Kevin married his equally entitled girlfriend, Karen. Robert and Susan threw them a wedding that cost more than my entire first year of business revenue. They gave them a down payment for a new house and a brand new SUV as a wedding gift. Meanwhile, Mark told me we needed to be frugal, that we had to pour everything back into his business. For Lily's 3rd birthday, my in-laws gave her a used teddy bear with a matted patch on its ear. 2 weeks later, at Karen's baby shower, they gifted her a top-of-the-line stroller that cost $1,000. It was for their future grandchild, they explained, the first grandson. It was another small cut, a reminder of my place, and Lily's place, in their carefully constructed hierarchy. The year Lily turned 5, the world turned gray. It started with a cough that wouldn't go away. I took her to our pediatrician, who prescribed antibiotics, but they didn't help. A month went by, and she was pale, lethargic, and her breathing was shallow. I was sick with worry. I found a top pediatric pulmonologist in the state capital, 3 hours away, and told Mark I was booking an appointment. He hesitated. "Honey, that sounds expensive. Dad says specialists always run unnecessary tests. Let's just give it another week." I looked at him, pleading, but he was already parroting his father's words about fiscal responsibility. My money, my company's profits, were locked away in accounts that he controlled, and he was using them to deny my daughter care. His mother was even worse. When I mentioned my concerns on our weekly family phone call, Susan just laughed. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said breezily. "You're being hysterical. She's just a child building her immune system. Now Karen's doctor says she needs to eat more organic kale for the baby. Robert is having a case shipped to their house as we speak." They were more invested in the health of their unborn grandchild than in the well-being of the one who was gasping for air right in front of them. The injustice of it was a physical weight on my chest. A few nights later, I woke up to a terrifying sound, a shallow, wheezing gasp from Lily's room. I ran in and found her struggling to breathe, her lips tinged with blue. I didn't even wake Mark. I just picked her up, ran to the car, and broke every speed limit on the way to the emergency room. The doctors took one look at her and rushed her into intensive care. The diagnosis was a rare, aggressive form of bacterial pneumonia that had been silently ravaging her lungs for weeks. The head doctor looked at me with pity in his eyes. "If we had caught this a month ago," he said softly, "we could have treated it with a simple course of targeted antibiotics. Now, we'll do everything we can." They did everything they could, but it wasn't enough. My beautiful, bright, perfect daughter died 3 days later in a hospital bed, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. The silence in that room was the loudest sound I've ever heard. The guilt completely shattered Mark. He saw his parents' callousness, his own weakness, reflected in our daughter's empty bed. He was a ghost for the next 2 months, hollowed out by grief and self-loathing. Then, one rainy Tuesday, he drove his car into a bridge abutment on the interstate. The police called it an accident. I knew it was a confession. At Mark's funeral, my in-laws put on an Oscar-worthy performance. Susan collapsed into Robert's arms, a fragile porcelain doll of a grieving mother. Robert stood stoically by the casket, accepting condolences with a grave look that was supposed to convey tragic strength. They were the stars of the show, the magnets for everyone's pity. I was just a background character in their drama, the pale, silent widow. They patted my hand and whispered empty comforts. "Don't you worry about a thing, dear," Susan murmured, dabbing at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. "We'll take care of everything now." I didn't realize at the time that she meant it literally. The charade lasted exactly 1 week. They called me and said they were coming over for a family meeting to discuss the future. They sat on my sofa in the house I had paid for and laid out the terms of my surrender. Robert did most of the talking, his voice calm and patronizing, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "As you know," he began, "Mark handled all the finances. And since he passed so unexpectedly without a will, and with Lily gone, well, legally, his estate passes to us, his next of kin." He said it so matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing the weather. The house, the business I built from scratch, the savings I had bled for. It was all, in the eyes of the law as they understood it, their property now. Susan reached over and patted my knee, a gesture devoid of warmth. "We've decided to be very generous," she said. "We'll give you enough to live on for a few months, to get yourself a small apartment, and of course, you can stay here for another month while you get your things in order." Then Karen, who had been silent the whole time, placed a hand on her swelling belly. "It's for the best," she said, her eyes flicking toward the hallway. "This house is too big for you, and it needs a family. It needs laughter again." That's when Robert delivered the final blow. "Kevin and Karen will be moving in at the end of the month," he announced, as if it were a done deal. "We think it's what Mark would have wanted, and that room, Lily's room, it's on the sunny side of the house. It will make a perfect nursery for the new baby." They looked at me, expecting tears, pleading or a desperate cry of injustice. They got none of it. I just sat there, a hollowed-out shell, and nodded. I let a single tear roll down my cheek and whispered, "Okay." Their faces relaxed into triumphant smiles. They saw a broken woman who had given up. They had no idea they were looking at a loaded gun with the safety off. For the next 2 weeks, I was a ghost in my own life. I packed boxes with a deadness in my heart that felt bottomless. Each photo of Lily, each tiny dress, was a fresh stab of pain. I packed Mark's things with a detached numbness, his clothes, his books, his awards. It all felt like artifacts from a different life that belonged to someone else. My in-laws would call daily to check in, which was really just to ask how the packing was going and to remind me of my deadline. Susan even told me not to bother packing up Lily's room. "Just leave it, dear," she'd said. "We'll have a service come and clear it all out. It will be less painful for you that way." They didn't want to spare my feelings. They wanted to erase my daughter with industrial efficiency. The change came on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the back of Mark's closet, dealing with old boxes of his college things he'd refused to ever throw away. Tucked inside his old university briefcase, a place he hadn't touched in over a decade, my fingers brushed against a thick manila envelope. My name was written on the front in his familiar scrawl. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside, there were 2 documents. The first was a legally notarized last will and testament, dated the week after Lily died. My breath caught in my throat. In clear, undeniable language, Mark left everything to me. He named the house, the business, every bank account and investment. He wrote, "All assets, though held in my name, were generated and earned by the hard work of my wife. She is the sole and rightful owner of everything." He had seen a lawyer in his final guilt-ridden days. He had done the one thing his parents never thought him capable of. He had defied them. The second document was a handwritten letter, 10 pages long. It was a confession. He wrote about the decades of manipulation by his parents, how they drilled into him that he had to control the family finances, how they belittled me and my contributions behind my back. He admitted they saw me as nothing more than a workhorse to fund their lifestyle and Kevin's future. The words that stopped my heart were on page 7. "My father told me not to waste money on the specialist for Lily. He said it was a scam, and like a fool, I listened. I will never forgive myself. I let them kill our daughter." Reading those words, something inside me shifted. The crushing weight of grief didn't vanish, but it solidified. It morphed from a heavy, suffocating blanket into a core of pure, cold, unadulterated rage. The will was my legal sword. The letter was my shield. They hadn't just taken everything from me, they had taken her. And now, with their son's own words, I was going to burn their world to the ground. I carefully placed the documents back in the envelope, picked up my phone, and made an appointment with the best probate lawyer in the state. Then I went back to packing, playing the part of their perfect victim. My lawyer was a shark in a $1,000 suit. He read the will, and a smile spread across his face. "This is ironclad," he said. "Perfectly executed, witnessed, and notarized. They don't have a leg to stand on." Then he read Mark's letter, and his smile vanished, replaced by a grim resolve. "This is a moral atomic bomb," he breathed. "We won't need to use it in court, but it guarantees they will never challenge you publicly." His advice was simple and brutal. Do nothing. Let them continue to believe they hold all the cards. Let them incriminate themselves. "Get a digital voice recorder," he told me. "Our state has one-party consent for recording conversations. Let them talk. Let them dig their own graves." So I did. I became the most convincing victim imaginable. I'd call Susan, my voice cracking, and tell her I didn't know how I was going to move all these boxes by myself. Her voice on the other end would be a sickly, sweet mix of pity and impatience. "You're stronger than you think, dear," she'd say, the unspoken words "hurry up" hanging in the air between us. The next day, Karen sent me a text with 3 different shades of yellow paint. "Which one do you think is best for a gender-neutral nursery?" I saved the screenshot. Robert called me to demand I cancel the high-end internet plan because Kevin doesn't need all that bandwidth. I recorded the entire conversation. They were so drunk on their apparent victory that they didn't bother with subtlety. They were bullies kicking a wounded animal, and they enjoyed every second of it. Their plan was to arrive on a Saturday morning. Kevin and Karen would come with a U-Haul to move their things in, while Robert and Susan would supervise my final exit. The day before, Susan called me for a final briefing. "We're all coming tomorrow at 10, she announced. "Robert and I will handle clearing out Lily's room. It's better if you're not there for that part. We'll just pack it all up for donation. It's time to make way for a new, happy life in that house." Her voice was smug, condescending, and completely devoid of compassion. It was the last piece of evidence I needed. I looked around the house at the stacks of boxes I had filled with my old life. I looked at the closed door to Lily's room, and I made a promise to her. I promised her they would not erase her. They would not dance on her memory. They would pay for every single tear she ever cried. "You're right, Susan," I said into the phone, my voice steady and calm. "It is time. I'll be ready for you." I hung up and spent the rest of the night not packing, but preparing. I dismantled my past and assembled my future. By dawn, the house was silent, and Lily's room was no longer a bedroom. It was a boardroom, and court was about to be in session. "What have you done?" Susan shrieked again, her voice cracking. Robert finally found his footing, his face purpling with rage. He took a step into the room, puffing out his chest to reclaim his authority. "This is my son's house," he boomed. "You have no right to do this. We have been more than generous with you, and this is how you repay us, by desecrating your daughter's memory." I leaned back in my new leather chair, my expression unmoved. "First," I said, my voice cutting through his tirade like a shard of ice, "you are trespassing. This is my house. It has always been my house. I paid for it." I slid a document across the polished surface of the desk. "This is a copy of my husband's legally executed will, filed with the probate court 2 weeks ago. In it, Mark leaves 100% of his assets to me, stating that I was their sole earner. It seems he found his conscience in his final days." Robert snatched the paper, his hands trembling as his eyes scanned the legal text. Susan and Karen crowded behind him, their faces draining of all color as they realized what it meant. "This is a fake," Susan hissed, her eyes wild. "You tricked him. He was grieving. He wasn't in his right mind." "Oh, he was in his right mind," I replied, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. He was, for the first time in his life, perfectly clear about who his family really was. I let the silence hang for a moment before delivering the fatal blow. He also left a letter, a very detailed, 10-page letter. He wrote all about your financial advice, Robert. Specifically, the advice you gave him not to waste money on the pediatric specialist who could have saved Lily's life. The sound Susan made was a choked, strangled gasp. Robert looked as if I had physically struck him. His blustering rage collapsed, leaving a hollow, terrified old man in its place. "Now, for the housekeeping," I continued, sliding 2 more documents toward them. "This is a no trespass order for all 4 of you. The police are waiting at the end of the street to serve it to you personally. And this," I added, pushing a 3rd folder, "is an eviction notice. You have 24 hours to collect any of Kevin's things you may have already brought onto my property. After that, they will be disposed of." I looked past them, out into the living room. "The locks will be changed tomorrow at noon." Karen began to sob uncontrollably, leaning on a silent, slack-jawed Kevin. "But our baby," she whimpered. "We have nowhere to go." I stood up, the chair rolling back silently. I looked at the 4 of them, these parasites who had feasted on my life, my work, and my grief. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a vast, quiet emptiness where my pain used to be. "That sounds like a personal problem," I said. "Now get out of my house." They stumbled out, a pathetic, defeated parade. I watched from the window as the police car pulled up, and an officer handed them the official papers. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt quiet. That night, I established the Lily Foundation. an organization dedicated to funding treatment for children with rare respiratory illnesses. My company, now thriving under my sole leadership, was its primary benefactor. They didn't erase my daughter. Instead, her memory became a beacon, a legacy of hope built on the ashes of their greed. They wanted a nursery, but I built an empire in her name.